Hey, everyone, if you haven't yet, be sure to go to podsurvey.com to take a quick survey to help us get some advertisers and to help us keep this podcast free. That's podsurvey.com/last. Really helps us out a lot. We appreciate every single one of you.
There's no place to escape to.
This is the last podcast.
On the left. That's when the cannibalism started.
What was that?
I pressed record.
Press record. That's the most important button.
Sometimes when church, I am killing the babysitter, wrapping a bunch of tape around her head. I'm sorry, I just can't get my hands around the song. Let me just try it again. Sometimes when we touch, I get my daughter pregnant.
All right, no, redo it again. Redo it.
I don't know how to write a song about Frederick and Rosemary West without including how they raped their own daughter, put a baby in her, and then choked her to death in a rancid basement in Gloucester, England.
Well, I thought we were recording a Christmas album today, so I'm way off. I had no idea who Fred or Mary West were.
My name's Terry Tingleton, and I write songs about serial killers for Light FM.
Terry Kingleton?
And I write songs about serial killers for Light FM.
Right.
All right, we've established this.
That's great. Yes.
I've done it again. I wrote a song about Jeffrey Dahmer called I'm Hungry for Your Bones. And it did not do well on the charts.
No, I remember that. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we were banned for 3 weeks.
I am not a successful man. I live in a tent outside of a Motel 6 somewhere in Valdosta, Georgia. But I will continue to write my songs because a broken clock's always right twice.
All right, well, the hour's up. Thank you so much. Get out of here.
I was expecting this. I gotta go.
Welcome to the last podcast on the left, everyone. That's Marcus Parks. I'm Ben Kissel. We're joined by the very talented Henry Zabrowski as well.
Today's topic is disgusting.
Spooky, ooky, but it's about love at the same time.
Is it?
Yeah, Fred and Mary West.
Okay, we'll say it's about soulmates. And
Yeah,
sometimes,
right.
sometimes having a soulmate is a beautiful, wonderful thing that lets you know that there's good and kindness in this universe. But sometimes those souls belong to two monsters who should have been put down at very young ages.
Like Ronald and Nancy Reagan.
Yeah,
Think
trickle
about-
down.
Think about
That's what gets
it.
me mad.
Yeah.
Trickle down.
Trickle down.
And of course, we're doing Fred and Mary West today, or Fred and Rose West today. I always call her Mary, just sounds better.
No, Rose is more appropriate because Rose is more of a prostitute's name.
Yes, yes.
But we're doing Fred and Rose West today. The reason why we're doing England's most notorious serial killers this week is because we can finally officially announce that we're going to be coming to England for a full tour in late March.
Late March,
Yay.
UK, look out.
And we're saying this right now. We're going to fuck up some names
Oh, bad.
in this episode. But by the time we get to the UK, we will be better at pronouncing names.
Yep.
Because I don't want to... Because someone told me that there's a thing called getting glassed
Yes.
in the UK.
What's that all about?
It's exactly what it sounds like.
What, they throw glass at you?
No, it means that if you piss somebody off in the UK, and tell listeners, tell us if I'm right or if I'm wrong. What they'll do is that they'll wait for you to be in the middle of like drinking your beer, and they'll come up to you and just smash the end of the glass into your face.
Yeah. Oh, that's classic college stuff. I can deal with that.
Yeah, so let's we're gonna start off on the 23rd of March in Cardiff. Then we're going to Birmingham. We're gonna do the Glasgow Comedy Festival. We're gonna play Salford, which is in Manchester. Salford.
I don't know.
And then we're going to end the whole thing up in London on Friday the 27th. The tickets go on sale on Friday, on
All
the
right.
12th.
It's going to be a great show. All right, let's.
And Salford is the first place that Paul McCartney ever had a chicken wing.
I've actually heard that story.
That's a fun fact.
I believe
Lots of fun facts.
I believe that's entirely true. As a matter of fact, at that chicken wing restaurant, that's where Ringo was working. So that's where he
And he's back there now.
He's right.
He's back there now having a great time telling everybody that he's still the...
Yep, he's still the shitty Beatle.
Oh, you like it? You want to get... I've got teriyaki. Oh, let me know my own flavors. This one's called Octopus's Garden. It tastes like fucking squid.
Oh, I love Octopus's Garden. That's my favorite kind of chicken wing. All right, let's get to Fred. Yeah. Let's get to Fred and Rose West.
Oh, and you can go to gigsandtours.com to buy tickets for the last podcast on the Left Live show in England.
Before we begin this episode, well, you know what I'd say? You know, if you've got a daughter, don't touch her.
No, leave.
You know what I mean? Leave him alone.
Leave him alone.
And really, if you've got a son, don't touch him.
Don't touch your kids.
For a day. After you listen to this episode, just don't even look at your kid. All right, let them just kind of sit in their own juices for a little while. They don't need too much more meddling.
They're fine.
So, Fred and Rose West. Between 1967 and 1987, West, alone and later with his second wife, Rosemary West, tortured and raped numerous young girls, murdering at least 11, including a couple of their own family members. And the crimes often occurred in the couple's homes in the city of Gloucester at 25 Midland Road, but most of the murders took place in the most infamous address in England, 25 Cromwell Street.
Have you seen pictures of the address sign of 25 Cromwell Street?
No.
Is it just made of bones?
It looks like it fell off of like an HR Huff and Puff, whatever show. It's just like, it's all like big doodly writings. Like I guess was like common in England in the 70s.
Let's see it.
It
looks far too friendly for what happened there, I think. I can't get a date off of Tinder, and this man was married twice.
Yeah.
That's upsetting to me.
But did you see the women that he was married to?
Were they women or were they men? They were women.
Yes, they were women. Let's start with the early life.
I will put it this way. Rose West was kind of attractive in like been hit in the head with a frying pan, eat nothing but bangers and mash kind of way.
Yeah.
She was a prostitute. People paid to have sex with her, and Fred just got it for free.
All right. So Fred West, let's start with the early life of this guy, as we usually do with the heavy hitters. He was don't eat lunch. If you're eating food, just stop eating food right now.
Please.
This is going to get really, really bad. This is among the most disturbing that we've ever covered, if not the most disturbing heavy hitter. He was born in the small rural village of Much Markle in Hertfordshire. They're all bad names. Fred West never lived in a place that had a good name. They're all awful fucking names.
Yeah.
They all just sound like candies.
Yeah. They don't have the fun American names like Pleasant Point or just like Place to Be.
No, they've got names like Coatbridge and Lanarkshire.
Yeah.
So he was born in Much Marcle in Herefordshire in 1941. That's 120 miles from London. His father, Walter, was a cowman and was...
What is a cowman?
It's a cow, like a cowboy. He raised cows. He was
but he's a rapist?
Yeah.
So that's why he's a cowman?
Yes.
That's implied, I think.
You're giving my band a very bad name here.
Yeah. This is an opportunity for you to plug your band.
The Cowman album out in March.
That's great. Never miss an opportunity, even when you're talking about the father of a man who raped and murdered countless women. Good.
He was many years older than his wife, Daisy. She was just 16 when they married and was a lifelong morbidly obese woman.
Daisy is not a name for a person, it's the name for an animal.
I agree. Daisy's a terrible name for a gal. Unless your name is Daisy out there and you're listening, I think you're beautiful.
So Fred, he was the second of 6 children that Daisy and Walter would have over the short span of 10 years. It was one after another with these people. It never stopped. Later on in life, Fred would routinely rape one of his sisters with his brother John and their father. And this right here, this is important to remember. Fred says that he impregnated his sister, but as we'll see with Fred West, pathological liar. So any information that we get from Fred West should always be taken with a grain of salt.
But he did definitely rape and kill 13 people, if not more.
13 at least.
But it's kind of fun. It's like Fred and his father, they're sort of like the Manning family. You know, the Peyton
are.
Manning, Eli Manning, Artie Manning.
You got the DNA. You've got the training.
Right.
You're all raping your sister, just like the Mannings.
Yep.
So the West, they grew up very secluded. They rarely mixed with outsiders.
Which is so weird because they seem real cosmopolitan.
I know, don't they, with their shoes and having sex with all the animals.
So, of course, this environment, Fred saw incest and rape. He grew up seeing incest and rape as something that was normal.
Right.
This was what he was isolated from everybody else. He quit school at the age of 15 because he was a bit of a dullard. Couldn't read, couldn't write. Very charming guy, though. Had definitely had the gift of gab.
I don't know. They say that about so many serial killers, and I feel like that's just way overblown because their crimes are so heinous. And then they'll be like, but in reality, he would grunt.
No, it's because he does it. It's because it's like when you meet Fred West, you expect him to be like, "Hey, won't you come here? You ain't got my cord, you fucking bitch." And like it's when you meet him and he's just like, "Hello." They're like, "Oh, look at that. He can think. How charming he is."
Are you going to treat all the people in the UK like gnomes? Is that your plan, Henry? Oh, look at them. Like, that's our cab driver, Mr.
I've said this
Zabrowski.
before. I believe that British women are absolutely gorgeous and their men are very smart.
I've heard you say it before, and I just heard you say it again.
So Fred, in addition to raping his sister, he took the incest even further, losing his virginity to his mother at the age of 12.
Thank God.
But that's not on Fred. That's on Daisy. Don't give Fred that one.
I'm not
Takes
giving.
two to tango, man.
He was 12.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm not. I'm giving that to Daisy, but it definitely left a bit of a mark on little
We'll put it
Fred's
this
psyche.
way. Daisy was the Jordan in that scenario. Fred
Right.
was the Scottie Pippen.
Sure.
And of course, the mother, Fred, was her favorite little boy.
Of course.
and
Because
so
she was sucking his dick.
yeah, on
That's
the
how
reg.
you know if how mom has chosen favorites. That's just a factoid that everybody should know.
By
Is
dick?
if she's sucking your brother's dick,
Right.
he's the favorite.
Maybe it's best not to be the favorite. I feel like maybe
Well, if you want to be president.
right.
So, of course, his mother would go up to school and constantly defend every little act that Fred did, and he gained the reputation for being a mama's boy. But the other thing that he gained a reputation for was hardcore bestiality.
Oh, man.
And that was a skill that
Charming
he-
guy.
Charming
Fred West,
guy.
what a charming guy.
And he actually gained all of his knowledge of bestiality from his father. His father told him, Henry, do you want to take how his father
obvious.
instructed him the best way to take a sheep?
If you slip a sheep's hind legs under your boots, it can't run away.
Oh,
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Dad. And when
These are the conversations, you know, Daddy. These are the conversations that a kid can't forget. I like that time you said, "Hey, why don't we go rape your sister?"
Right. I mean, it's funny to me in a way because he's actually making his father and his mother very proud with his actions, isn't he? He's doing up to this point.
Up to this point. And we'll see later how they bafflingly find a reason to disown him. But until then, he's still the pride of the family. And his father had a very simple philosophy that Fred would carry with him for his entire fucking life. And this is a terrible philosophy to give to a psychotic child.
Yeah.
He said, do whatever you want. Just don't get caught doing it.
Right.
You see, it's a simple philosophy.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
It's very, very simple, but in the hands of a psychopath, it turns into rape and murder for at least 13 women.
Right.
And Fred, he idolized his dad. He looked up to him. He thought that his dad was the fucking bee's knees. He's the man who has all the answers. He taught me how to fuck sheep. He taught me how to fuck my sister. He lets me fuck my mom. And he thought that his father hung the
Different.
fucking moon. Ooh.
Also, what's interesting too is how this is different from every other heavy hitter we've really covered. Is that he had a strong relationship with his father? This is literally pinioned on, and mostly it's a rebellion. Mostly it's like a rebellion from the parents. So this is why I act this way, or like because they treated them terribly. This was just like, they were fucking pals.
Yeah.
He taught him, like, he became an apprentice to a guy who is everything but a serial killer.
Right.
Yeah, as far as we know.
Or you have like Dahmer's dad, where he was just like, "There, why? I just didn't know.
I didn't know what he was doing back there, but I heard some meowing. But I thought he wanted to be a vet. I am not sure.
That is true. I think that is true.
So, like many other serial killers, Fred West suffered from a very serious head injury at a young age. He crashed his motorcycle head on into a car that was traveling in the other direction. He spent a week in a coma. His broken leg, the leg that he broke in the accident, would be permanently shorter than the other, which caused him to limp for the rest of his life. And
do you think that was just him just driving, going like, seeing the truck coming, it's going like, "You get out of the way! You get out of the way now!"
Quite possibly. And he had a metal plate that was inserted into his head. And Fred, he already had inherited obvious mental problems from his parents. His parents were not sane people, but that combined with a fucking twisted and bizarre childhood environment and serious frontal cortex injuries really brought everything together to make this guy the perfect fucking killer. Now, we've seen with frontal cortex injuries before. The frontal cortex, Gacy had it. I believe Bundy had it. This is where the conscience lives. Like, where the things that would make all of us say, fuck no, I'm not going to do that, that's repulsive, these people don't have that.
Well, it's a good thing James Dean died in that crash. Otherwise, he would have came out a serial killer.
What I also think is interesting, too, is I like this concept that the idea that the frontal lobe may be where the antenna is that connects us to the collective unconscious.
Yeah, that's my theory.
I like this idea.
Thank
I like
you.
this idea a lot because you can see how that would affect empathetic idea. Like, if basically it's like you got knocked off the Wi-Fi, and now you have to look at porn that's on your computer, which is you just drawing boobies on MS Paint.
I mean, that's not necessarily how I'd put forth my theory.
But I think that's how I would. I'm doing it for the normal man, for the working man.
But yes, I do believe that the connection to the collective unconsciousness of humanity does live in the frontal cortex of our brain, and then once that is severed, then guilt is essentially gone. Not everyone necessarily becomes a serial killer. Some people become CEOs.
Sure.
Some people become the shitty person.
Some people become podcast comedians.
Ooh, yeah.
I did have a frontal cortex injury as a child.
I used to just do somersaults into the corner of my wall. I swear to God, I did. And then I would also have Hammer Tuesdays, where I just hit my head with a hammer on Tuesdays.
So after this accident, Fred, of course, was suddenly prone to extreme fits of rage. He became extremely violent over extremely mundane things.
But okay, so at this point, when he gets really angry, he has one leg is shorter than the other, and he has a metal plate in his head, right?
Yeah.
So that's funny. Like when you see a dude with one short leg, it'd be like, yeah, punch me in the side of the head. That's the metal side. I don't care. Like, that's funny.
Yeah, that is really funny. Yeah. But after that accident, it wasn't the only serious head injury that Fred ever had. After that, he tried to stick his hand up the skirt of a girl while they were both on the fire escape. She pushed him off, and Fred landed head first onto the concrete. And that knocked him out for
Here's my
24
thing.
hours.
I don't think a rape-related injury can technically add to the serial killer thing, because I think just the act of trying to rape her, that's more of it.
But he was just regularly trying to rape women at this point, because in his mind, it had been fused that sex equals control and domination. And he's also much more aggressive now. So he's also got his father's wisdom of, if it feels good, do it, just don't get caught. All of these things together, if he wants a woman, he will take her. He will take whatever he wants.
Right.
Well, never mind the fact that his many injuries made him look like he looked like Herman Munster.
Oh yeah, he was just slowly devolving into the monster, the creature he would become.
Yeah.
He's got a limp. He's got a plate in his head. His head is like a a cylinder.
Right.
It's been so fucked up over and over again. He probably said, yeah, all right. Hey, don't let my leg quit you, or I'm going to grab your knees, little girl. Like, he starts doing that over and over again. It's going to be hard for him to work in retail. It's going to be hard for him to do fun stuff.
Welcome to Forever 21. I'm Fred West.
Come on, man. You want to try this tube top on? Let me put it on you. Let me try it myself.
He didn't have a lot going for him.
No, he didn't. And he, of course, like many other serial killers, he was also a petty thief. But what I mentioned earlier about the bizarre thing that made his family disown him, at 19, he was forced out of his village in which he grew up for impregnating a 13-year-old girl.
Okay.
And it's, of course, this also shows you his fucked up way of thinking. Instead of responding with just guilt or remorse or anything like that, when they asked him, like, why did you do this? Why did you fuck a 13-year-old girl? He just said, doesn't everybody do it?
I mean, that's how confused he was, but that's really what he thought.
That's exactly what he thought.
So, but this 13-year-old was outside of the family, right?
Yes.
So I think his parents
Well, that's good. That's at least good.
It's a step in the right direction, I will say.
I suppose so.
But for his parents, maybe they felt like he was blowing their cover. Maybe he's just like, what are you doing having sex with other people outside of the family? We have sex inside the family.
Yeah.
You know, very cultish.
I guess so. At his trial, a doctor actually testified that West, much like John Wayne Gacy, suffered from epileptic fits.
Okay.
That's what we saw again and again in Gacy. And what I actually researching this, Fred West is the straight John Wayne Gacy.
Yes.
Yeah, he really is.
And honestly, very similar careers. Construction worker, just no clown. That's the problem. He doesn't have that pop. He doesn't have an American fucking style like we have.
Yeah, he had no style.
No, he's a different character in the sideshow of serial killers. That's for sure.
He's a different character, but he's in the same tent as Gacy.
He's the Yosemite Sam of serial killers. That's how I imagine him going, kicking his tiny leg.
God, that would be so Gacy doing the clown tricks, and then you have Fred West just being all limpy and gimpy, and then you're like, and watch Mr. Dahmer eat a penis. That'd be the best sideshow ever.
That is one thing that a psychiatrist said, a psychiatrist who studied Fred West, that he said about him that was different from other serial killers is Fred West approached the entire thing with extreme enthusiasm. Like with enthusiasm and glee. A lot of guys, they kind of look at it as, this is a thing that I have to do.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer was tortured. John Wayne Gacy was hiding a secret. Like Ted Bundy didn't do it with enthusiasm. He was just a fucking rip-roaring maniac.
Well, I think by the Florida State, that rampage, I think, was very, I would argue, enthusiastic. 15 minutes, 4 girls with a log, but...
Yeah.
Well, it's just more like, I'd say he left it all on the dance floor.
You could use that analogy, yeah.
Fred West, he would approach it with just a glee, I think.
Let me get at you, Tushy. Let me get at it. Woo-hoo-hoo. Woo-hoo-hoo. He's the only one who said woo-hoo.
Yeah.
While he was raping somebody.
And speaking of Glee, we'll be playing the Cardiff Glee Club on March 23rd.
Very excited.
2015. Come on out. Tickets go on sale Friday. So, after he had been disowned, Fred moved back to Much Markle with his Aunt Violet. And it was, Much Markle.
So did the parents of his mother just name everything after the flowers they saw? Violet, now you're just mud. Because we don't find no flower.
Yeah, we got daisies, we got violets, we got roses. This is a flower-filled podcast.
It's very floral.
So it was at this time that he reconnected with an old girlfriend, a girl named Catherine Costello, but her prostitute name was Rena.
Oh, nothing like having sex with a Rena and an hour-long stay at a motel.
Oh, my God.
Rena, I want to marry you. I don't know why you'd want to marry me. I'm a pile of filth.
Well, maybe that's what he loves about her.
So the two married and moved to the village of Coatbridge in Lanarkshire. God, it's the worst names.
Lanarkshire. You know what? Also, every England town sounds like a name for a sauce, like a brown condiment.
Yeah, it sounds pretty tasty now that I think about it.
So Rena, she was already 5 months pregnant with her first daughter, Charmaine.
Oh, and what a lucky daughter she's gonna be.
Beautiful, beautiful name.
Charmaine.
Yeah, she was fathered by a Pakistani bus driver who skedaddled.
He didn't stick around
Didn't stick
to
around.
see Rena and Charmaine didn't want a little family.
I'm so sorry, Rena. I never meant to make love to you even once. I was trying to finish my route. Please, if you could just let me go. Let me go. I have 9 families.
Yeah.
So Fred would actually take Charmaine as his own, in addition to fathering his own child with Rena named Anne Marie. And Fred's parents, this is bizarre. Fred's parents thought that Charmaine, that the child belonged to Fred rather than the Pakistani bus driver. So when the
Wait, what?
wait.
Okay.
So, but Fred told him that while Rena was pregnant. He said, like, okay, she's pregnant with my baby. So when the baby came out a little brown and half Pakistani, Fred just wrote a letter to his parents, told them that the child died in childbirth, and to replace that child, they adopted a mixed-race kid.
And that is just, it's a bad lie.
But they believed it.
God, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but yeah, it seems to work.
There is not a single smart person involved anywhere in this story.
Definitely not.
No. So in Coatbridge, Fred worked as an ice cream truck driver.
Ooh, that is creepy.
Yeah.
That's sort of a gay. That's a little Gacy-ish.
Yeah. We had an ice cream truck driver in the town that I grew up in. Drank buttermilk straight from the carton in the middle of a Texas summer. Like it was,
That's disgusting.
it was.
The farts that must have filled that ice cream truck.
It was.
Him just coming up to little girls, so it's got the selling ice cream, just been like, "Hey, little girl, hey, you want some Skittles on there? I'll rub my pubes on it." Shouldn't have said it. Shouldn't have said it.
After this podcast and everything else, I don't think I can have a kid anymore. Like, everything's ruined. Is there anything innocent anymore?
Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers.
That's it.
Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Never be
He's
ruined.
dead, Marcus. He's fucking dead.
Good. He died with a clean name.
He did.
So
Is that what all life is now? Is it just getting out clean?
I think it is.
yeah, that's all there is, Henry. I mean, that's all we have anymore.
After 70, you're guaranteed to get brought down by something.
Yeah. So as Fred was working as an ice cream truck driver, which gave him access to numerous teenage girls all over Coatbridge, of course, he did have an accident here. This is the very first time that blood was ever on his hands. He ran over and killed a 4-year-old boy with his van in 1964. The accident was ruled in Fred's favor. Yeah, the boy ran out.
Technically, though, in Coatbridge, you can claim that he was trying to make him a speed bump, and that you get off scot-free because technically you're a civil engineer then.
Oh, very good.
So Fred, being a little paranoid, decided it was time to skip town, leave Coatbridge.
Yeah, and they went to the neighboring town, Lollipop Town,
Oh yeah. Nope.
which is right next to Boot Building.
Nope. Fred and his family, their nanny, and a friend of Rena's named Anne McFall moved to Bishop's Cleeve in Gloucester. Oh, God.
So this,
That just sounds like the top of a pre-sass.
yeah, the Bishop's Cleave. But they had a nanny. I mean, he must have had some income coming through here with the ice cream gig and whatnot.
He was a thief.
He was just a thief. but a thief enough to have a nanny.
Yeah. Thief enough to have a nanny.
All right.
Yeah, and this was in Gloucester, where they would eventually settle at 25 Cromwell Street, but that's going to come later. Fred actually got a job at a slaughterhouse here, which this job is extremely important to what Fred would do later on. This guy, Colin Wilson, wrote this book called The Corpse Garden. He said, "One thing is clear, that at some stage, West developed a morbid obsession with corpses and blood and dismemberment.
Yeah.
There is no evidence that he had shown any such interest so far. It seems then that Fred West's sexual perversion became slowly more obsessive in the period following his marriage, and the evidence suggests that necrophilia and desire to mutilate corpses began during his period as a butcher.
I would have loved to see the interview with him going into the slaughterhouse for the job, and the guy was like, "Thank God you showed up. A bunch of people in business suits with like 2 working legs have been coming in and interviewing this entire goddamn town. I can't hire that scum. You got the metal plate. You got the limp. You're hired, Mr. West."
I'm built for this job.
Perfect.
I like to see the ribs, and I play with them like they're a xylophone.
And that's just
perfect.
good for morale. Yeah.
Can you work on 3 shifts? That'd be great. 3 shifts in a row. You know what? Also, too, is that you can see the direct line of logic too.
Yeah.
Where it's like he wanted sex to be easier. You get to a point where they build this sort of superiority complex of I can take anything I want, anybody I want.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he starts being in this slaughterhouse and he starts rubbing his dick one time on like a slab of fucking hamburger meat that they all ate in their fucking shepherd's pie 3 weeks later, he realized like this is the easiest way is dead people. And
Right.
if you don't give a fuck where your dick's going, like you've taught your dick to have sex with like ducks and shit,
Yeah.
you can fuck a corpse.
Oh, I would almost argue a corpse is better than having sex with a duck.
Yeah.
If you have to choose, well, that's a toss-up.
I want to isolate that sentence you just said.
No!
And I want to isolate that sentence, and then I want to just send it to every person you've ever worked with.
So Fred, as Henry said, the sexual demands became much more depraved, much more sadistic, violent oral sex, bondage, sodomy. He wanted it all hours of the day or night. So Rena and her nanny, having not been able to take it anymore, they escaped out to Scotland, but they left the children, Charmaine and Anne-Marie, behind with Fred and Rena's 16-year-old friend, Anne McFall, who had somehow become infatuated with Fred West.
God knows.
God knows.
Weird.
And so the 4 moved into a trailer, and McFall started taking care of Charmaine and Annie. And Rena, who was missing her children, she went back to Bishop's Cleeve, and she told Constable Hazel Savage, who will become very important later on in the story, that her husband...
Savage.
Hazel Savage, Constable Hazel Savage.
Yeah.
She told her that her husband was a sex pervert and unfit to raise the children. And of course, maybe not so coincidentally, there were 8 sexual assaults committed in the Gloucester area by a man of Fred's description at this time.
How many men are of Fred's description?
It's England. A lot. They're very smart.
It's the one guy with the metal in his head and the gimpy foot.
No, but how many of them have that? They've all worked horrible factory jobs.
Yeah.
They all look the same. He's got... If the back of his head is bigger than the front of his head, it's just, you can see the steps. It's like, those old 70s living room where you could step from the top, you step like 3 steps down into a lower living room?
Yeah.
That's the movement from the back of his head to his front of his face.
It's true. He's got a horrible, horrible head. But despite having a terrible head, he still managed to impregnate Miss McFall in late 1966. McFall started to pressure West to divorce Rena more and more over the years. And so West, who was cracking under the pressure, murdered Anne McFall when she was 8 months pregnant. Okay, this is when it really starts to get brutal. He cut the 8-month-old fetus out of Anne's body, he decapitated her, and he removed all of her fingers and toes and her kneecaps before burying her near the trailer park where they once lived together. She was the first one killed and the last one to be discovered.
But that also fits with his original reasoning, which is he cut the fetus out. I mean, number one, because you can play handball with it. But number 2,
Right.
so that when they found the body, it's this weird thing again where his validation was, I don't want anybody to know I was screwing around on my wife.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's what it's his daddy's rule. You can do anything you want as long as nobody knows about it.
Yeah, as long as no one gets caught. And the fingers, toes, and kneecaps thing, that would be Fred's MO for almost every murder that would come afterwards.
Well, he was doing a lot of fun Tim Burton type things with player pianos, just gluing them to the keys.
Yeah. Now, I guess the slaughterhouse kind of taught him how to pop a kneecap real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's perfect training.
Yeah, it really was. And
This guy is the Bo Jackson of UK serial killers.
Right.
yeah, and at this time it's said that he probably killed a girl named Mary Bastholm, who he kidnapped from a bus stop. They used to get a lot of girls from bus stops, and Fred's mother died in February of 1968 from complications of gallbladder surgery. That sent Fred into a bit of a theft spree. He didn't really know how to handle it, so he stole quite a bit. That was his coping mechanism, which caused him to switch jobs with fair frequency. But it was while he was employed as a delivery driver for a bakery where he would finally meet Rosemary Letts.
How does this man, he has so many women and so many jobs.
Gift of gab.
The gift of gab,
Gift
yeah.
of gab, man.
I just can't believe he was that charming.
He talked his way out of a sexual assault charge later on. We'll get to Fred and Rosemary West's first big day out. It is awful. It's terrible.
All right.
But we'll get to that.
I imagine he sees her, and it's that whole, like, that whoa, my love, my darling. Well, he's got 2 croissants around his balls, like playing with, look at her, staring at her, playing with them like they're his balls. Meanwhile, she's fucking sucking on a fork like it's a dick.
Yeah.
Well, Rose was born in Barnstaple.
It's a fine name. Barnstaple. It's good. There's a barn, and then maybe there was one person who had a staple once, and he became the mayor.
We are lucky to say we are the first town to have a pig as mayor.
That's good. A pig as a mayor is a fantastic mayor.
Progressive. She was born on November 29th, 1953.
So 12 years younger than Fred.
12 years younger. And this is very strange. Her mother was also named Daisy.
Not the most creative naming mechanism they have over here.
I suppose not. But Daisy, she suffered from severe depression, and while she was pregnant with Rose, she underwent regular electroshock therapy treatments while she was pregnant with this girl.
That cannot be healthy for a child.
Can't be healthy for a baby.
Unless you want to create
I think
a superhero.
technically it poaches the baby.
Yeah.
And of course, when Rose was born, she had many problems. She had a habit of rocking herself back and forth. When she was put in a pram, which is
What's a pram?
Pram's what they call baby carriage. So if she was put in a pram without the brake on, she would rock so violently that the pram would creep across the room.
I think that's terrifying.
Yeah, that's very scary.
Yeah, and as she became a little older, she only rocked her head back and forth, but she would do it for hours on end, which was the first indications that she was, in her family words, quote, a bit slow. Her nickname was Dozy Rosie.
Well, she'd be a lot faster if you took the brake off the damn thing.
And as she went from a baby to a toddler to a little girl, she'd just swing her head around for hours on end. And it would just hypnotize herself into semi-consciousness.
Did they ever think she was possessed?
No, they never did. They just thought she's a little slow, Dozy Rosie. Just leave her alone.
You got the technical. There's a British. There's a doctors come and look at it, and they call you. She was a doy.
Doy.
Doy. Yeah. That is doy. Yeah, round and round and round again.
Mm-hmm.
So Bill Letts, her father, he had his own problems. He was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He suffered from OCD. He had a life of rigidity. He was a Navy man, so everything had to be exact. Everything had to happen on time. And if the house was just a little bit dirty, if he didn't get dinner exactly when we wanted it, he would beat his wife and kids viciously. But Rose, who, despite being Dozy Rosie, was still cunning when it came to men and how to manipulate
So
men.
how did she escape the beatings, Marcus?
Oh, do you really want to know, Henry?
How did she get out of it if everybody else is getting beat?
I would just assume she just kept on moving her head too fast for him to hit it.
So she pulled a rope-a-dope.
She was rope-a-doping.
No, she fucked her father on
she
a
started sucking
regular
her father's cock.
Sucking her father's cock.
Cool.
But unlike
That's a good story.
It's a different
That's
kind of
awesome.
strategy.
yeah.
No, I think the Berenstein Bears did that thing. They said the Berenstein Bears and the time when the daughter sucked the father's penis so that they wouldn't get beat for burning dinner.
I remember that one, and it taught me a lot of different lessons.
Her name
I
was
really
Sister.
wish What's really weird is you remember how it was all in black and white except for the red of the blood on the mother bear's face.
Yeah, they pulled that issue, I think. They pulled that one after a little while.
Not many of those anymore.
Not
around.
too many are left, no.
While both of them had regular sexual relationships with their parents, unlike Fred, who would end his sexual relationship with his mother, presumably when he left home, Rose's sexual relationship with her father would continue up until his death. Well into her and Fred's relationship. And it is also said
Do you think he was just as surprised?
No, he
think
knew.
He would still just be like, Rose, at some point, you've got to leave the nest. You can't keep up. You got to cut the umbilical cord, Rose. Believe me, I love the blowjobs. But you got to leave the house every once in a while.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, you have to have your daughter go and spread her wings and have her suck other dicks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rose. Yeah. So we'll get more into what happened with them later. But Rose, she was only 15 when she met Fred, who was 27 at the time, and it was like Henry said. It's like the theme from A Summer Place started playing. They locked eyes and fell in love almost immediately.
They did have a lot in common, a surprising amount.
They had a huge amount. They had so much in common. It's scary. That's why.
You fucked your mom? That's so weird. Don't be fucking me dead.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why these people are so scary, is because they have such similar backgrounds. They happen to meet each other, and it was just the perfect formula for an extreme. And that's another thing that will come up later, is that they had to keep topping each other. They had to keep one step ahead of the other, and Rose especially had to keep one step ahead of Fred to keep Fred from eventually turning his murderous impulses on her. But they had to up the ante constantly.
I'm going to say not that difficult to stay one step ahead of Fred. He had one very, very short leg and then one longer one.
But I will put also this way, too. It's just like, that is just a very evil scenario. That is just the worst type of, oh, man.
Yeah.
I love to hear it.
Oh, yeah. So not long into the relationship, Fred was sent to prison for a petty theft charge. But Rose, she was already fully committed. She left the house at the age of 16 to take care of Fred's children, Charmaine and Anne-Marie. And while Fred was in prison, Rose gave birth to their first child, Heather. Although it is rumored, it is very possible that Heather is actually Rose's father's child.
Oh, God.
Yeah, because of the prison sentence, because Fred was in prison.
And she kept fucking her dad.
Isn't
that what that old 70s sitcom was about, All in the Family?
So motherhood, of course, surprisingly enough, didn't come naturally to Rose West. She was quoted as saying, Henry, take this one.
Breasts are for fucking, not breastfeeding. Beautiful woman.
Yeah. Sort of a tit job there, I guess.
Yep. And now that they had their own child, Fred and Rose, there was, of course, the matter of the other two children. One of them, Anne-Marie, was Fred's actual flesh and blood, but Charmaine, she was just the bastard of a bus driver who had no real relation to Fred or Rose.
I will say probably the smartest one.
I'm sure the smartest one. You gotta be smart to be a bus driver.
She was definitely the most nervous one.
So during the summer of 1971, Rose, in a fit of rage, which she was prone to go into, she took a beating on Charmaine a little too far and ended up murdering the 8-year-old shortly before Fred was released from prison. And once Fred returned, he removed the fingers, the toes, and the kneecaps, and he buried her underneath the floorboards of their house. And when Rena came looking for the child in the fall of 71, Fred took action himself this time. He got Rena drunk, he strangled her, he removed the fingers and toes and kneecaps, he dismembered her, and buried her near his first inconvenience, Ann McFall. But the pair would soon move into their very own graveyard at the most infamous address in England, 25 Cromwell Street.
And interviews with Fred, he talks about how like he originally did not find it easy to dismember the bodies, but what he would do, but the way he said it, it's like it just sounded like a lie anyway, because he was like, I looked around for a way to sort of, I needed to separate the limbs, and I'd look at the axe, and I was like, oh, no way, I could not put an axe to a woman's body.
Yeah.
But I had this long serrated blade that I'd use to cut chunks of ice, and I thought that I could use on a woman's body.
Mm-hmm. So he would
just like
cut off
really weird standards.
cutting off the toes and the kneecaps and the fingers, and then was he planting them in the ground, just trying to make some really weird trees or something?
We have no idea what he did with them.
They've never been found.
They've never been found. We have no idea where he put them, where he hid them, what he eventually did with them. He never, when he confessed to the murders, he never once said what they were for, what he was doing it for, or why. So we have no clue. It was just part of his ritual. But he had been doing it.
He just
from the
would keep
beginning.
them in his car, so after a big meal, he could like pick his teeth with them.
I mean, I had a couple of badger paws from a badger I had killed hanging
disgusting.
around a piece of wire off of my.
You're disgusting.
Right. These are these
Rear-view mirror.
little things that we should all remember. Those are red flags. That's a Marcus Parks red flag moment.
So 25 Cromwell Street. This place was perfect for the West.
Hey, my name's Marcus. You want to see my badger paws?
I'd love to not go to your house ever again.
No, if you were riding in my truck, you saw the badger paws. It was a single cab. They're right there. You couldn't help but look at them.
Right,
I didn't
right.
date a lot in that period in high school.
No, you didn't, huh?
Weird. That's weird.
I can't believe that Rebecca there, the prettiest girl in town, didn't love your badger paw collection.
No, her name was Michelle, and she did not appreciate it.
That's interesting. Honey, so do you think we should just put Marcus down now? Or should we wait until he gets real dumb?
No, he'll do something later.
Unfortunately, honey, he's exactly like I was.
I was better. Anyways, this place was perfect for the West family, large enough to house the 7 children that Rose would eventually give birth to. And by the way, only 4 of those were Fred's. The other 3 were fathered by John's, and we knew they were John's because Rose...
They were brown.
They were brown. Rose exclusively dealt with the West Indian crowd, Jamaicans, Jamaicans, people from Haitians, dealt exclusively in the big black fellas.
She was a very elite prostitute. That's what that means. She was only doing the most high-end clientele.
Well, Fred was obsessed with watching her.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. Is that he was upset because he built the Rose's room, which is really fucked up. They were talking about in the police investigation when they found it, because when they first started, basically Fred confessed. We'll get into when he confessed to a bunch of these murders. They all said it was because of like manslaughter, and it was because he had gotten heated. And it was a crime of passion. When they showed up and they saw this room had like a padded bed on the floor, for sound and video, they were like, "What the fuck is going on here?" And then they found stacks of videotapes of Rose having sex with John.
Oh, it was all wired with sound and video?
Yeah, and it had peepholes in different walls, so Fred could look in and watch her fucking the dudes because he was obsessed with watching a Jamaican dude just stuff her fucking holes.
Huh. It's like that movie Porky's. Remember
Yeah,
that when all the
it's
kids
a
used
lot
to
like
watch
Porky's.
the girls in the shower?
It's a lot like Porky's, except for all the rape.
Yeah.
Yeah, Porky's was just full of fun pranks.
Porky's was a part of rape culture. So think about that. Hashtag it.
Oh, and there was also Rose's room, of course, where she took all the Johns. There was a red light outside, so her children knew that her mother was, quote unquote, working. But it would be the basement that Fred would turn most of his attention to. And he even once joked to a neighbor that he was soundproofing the basement to turn it into his own private torture chamber.
I'm turning it into a torture chamber. I'm not joking.
He is funny.
This is real. This is real. I am doing it.
That is
I'm
funny.
gonna kill a girl down here.
Great.
Oh, my God.
British humor. We were talking yesterday with the book, with the tour manager for our UK tour, and then we were talking about Jimmy Savile.
Savile.
I'm not changing it for nobody. talking about how he used to just joke about having sex with underage girls, and they would just laugh and be like, that is just classic comedy.
Yeah, that's classic Savile. He's just amazing. And I guess it's the same kind of deadpan humor that made people write off West when he would openly joke about murdering people.
Right.
And
because he locally, it's like they were known as like a nice but eccentric couple.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone was saying. Like, so can you imagine what the eccentric was basically just him just being like, it's not like I'm going to rape her. And then they're like waiting for the laugh on the other end.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And
it's like, I don't like your catchphrase, Fred, but thank you for the grapes.
So the first victim to see the inside was Fred's 8-year-old daughter, Anne-Marie, from his first marriage. He and Rose undressed her and told her that she was lucky that she had such caring parents who were making sure that when she got married, she would be able to satisfy her husband. Anne-Marie's hands were tied behind her, and a gag was put in her mouth. Then while Rose held the girl down, her father raped her. The pain was so severe that the girl could not go to school for several days.
Snow day.
Oh, God.
God help me, Ben.
I mean, different, but...
Can you remember the movie Snow Day?
Oh, yeah, I remember the scene in it, yeah.
Can you imagine if it was like that instead?
Mm-hmm. That would be better for her.
Yeah.
That would be a better life instead of the decade of rape and torture that she would endure at 25 Cromwell Street.
It's fine. It turns out she became a singing sensation known as Kesha.
Good for her. Good for her.
Talented.
And so in their very first babysitter... now in November of 1972, we've got Caroline Owens, the first babysitter that the West would torture. They didn't actually kill this one. This was their practice run. Let's say this was their dry run. They picked up 17-year-old Caroline Owens while hitchhiking. She was hitchhiking from Tewksbury to her home in Cinderford. And she was picked up by Fred and Rose, who told her while she was driving, like, coincidentally, like, hey, we're looking for a nanny for our 3 kids. We just had a kid. Her name is Mae West, which that's terrible. And so Carolyn, who had strangely enough dreamed of becoming a nanny in past years, she also wanted independence from her family. She accepted and moved in with the West almost immediately. And of course, the first sign that something was weird, she saw the steady stream of men coming and going from Rose's bedroom. But Rose said, "Oh no, it's fine. I'm just a masseuse."
But the problem is that you can never take someone's word that they're a masseuse if they're like, "Oh, I'm a masseuse." Wink, wink, wink. Wink, 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 wink. It's like, it was really weird that she told me she was a masseuse and she winked for 7 minutes.
Another weird thing, Fred would offer her abortions on demand.
That's amazing.
Yeah, saying that not only was he extremely well equipped to do so, but other women on which he'd perform this service were so impressed with his abortion skills that they repaid him with sexual favors.
Nothing makes a woman more excited for sex than just having an abortion.
Yeah, that's sort of like, I'm going to repay you with the exact same thing that got me into this mess.
The big thing, too, but then, again, they kept punting. She was kind of like... They didn't really get scared by this talk because he had a really weird sense of humor. These were the jokes. I guess that's the problem, is that they all thought that these were jokes.
Yeah.
But he was just actually an open psychopath.
Yeah, he even casually mentioned that his 8-year-old daughter, Anne-Marie, had just lost her virginity.
Yeah.
Just casually mentioned that. But what made her eventually run the first time was that he propositioned her for sex. He said that him and Rose were a part of a sex circle with other men. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, yeah, come on, why don't you join it? And so she left the house for some reason. That was the last straw for her. But 2 months later, the West found her at a bus stop. Rose apologized for her husband's crude behavior. And Carolyn climbed right back into the fucking car and went with the Wests.
Right.
And minutes after she got into the car, Fred, of course, propositioned her for sex again. And when she refused, he said,
Go on, Rose. Have a feel and see if she's wet.
Ugh. And Rose pushed her hand down into Carolyn's crotch. The two started fighting. Fred pulled over to the side of the road, punched Carolyn until she was unconscious, and when Carolyn woke up, her hands were tied behind her back with her scarf. Her mouth was covered with packing tape, and she was taken into 25 Cromwell Street, where she would be sexually and psychologically abused for the next 12 hours.
Now, this is his MO that he will do with each one of these victims. When they recovered a lot of these victims, even after years of decomposition, they would find the remnants of packing tape from when he would wrap it all around their heads. But later on, he would stick tubes up their nose so they could breathe through the packing tape.
Yeah. They beat her with a belt, and Rose abused her as Fred took Rose from behind. Fred told her that if she didn't do what she wanted, he said,
I'll keep you in a cellar and let my black friends have you. And when we're finished, we'll kill you and bury you under the paving stones of Gloucester.
So he really used her racism against her. No, not the black friends. Anything but the black friends.
But after Rose left this girl alone with Fred, Fred started crying and told her that if she promised to not tell anybody, keep it our little secret, he'd let her go. So this girl Carolyn, terrified, she actually promised to return to become their nanny again. It's like, oh yeah, let's let bygones be bygones. Water under the bridge. But she only went to the police after her mother saw the bruises. And even though Fred and Rose have both pled guilty to sexual assault and kidnapping, Carolyn was too frightened to testify, so the two were only fined. They were caught with this. They were caught dead to fucking rights.
Right.
With all of this. They were fined $50 each for indecent assault and were let loose upon the world once more.
And this is also, again, we're going to see this a lot too, where every time they get caught, they're like, yeah, we did it.
Yeah. And what's a decent assault?
Indecent.
No, what's decent? What's a decent one?
Just using your fist, man.
That's pretty decent assault. That's a $25 fine.
It's stand-up boxing, or it's killing a Japanese person during World War II.
Right.
So, of course, this taught him two lessons. One, it's possible to do horrible things and get away with it. And two, it's best to not risk anything. It's best to not risk it. They want these sexual perversions. They want to torture women. They love doing it, but they knew that if they didn't kill these women, then this sort of thing was going to happen again and again and again. Right. So this is when the full-on murder torture begins with the completion of the cellar.
Ooh, the cellar. It's a scary place.
Oh, yeah. In the cellar, in Fred and Rose's torture cellar, victims were hung up, bound, stripped, and gagged for long periods of time.
Again, we're seeing slaughterhouse techniques in this whole thing, because he fitted that beam across the cellar ceiling and he would screw hooks into it, and he hung girls from the beam for days, and then they would just mummify there.
This is when
Which isn't cool.
This is when it's going to get rough. I'll go ahead and give you a warning. Prepare yourself, because this is when it gets real fucking rough. Fred's instruments of murder, they came from the same toolbox he used every day in his day job as a construction worker. He used hammers, he used knives, he used screwdrivers, tape, and of course he almost certainly indulged in necrophilia with the victims. And of course all the fingers, toes, and kneecaps were removed. They never discovered any of these, as I said earlier. And of course, after they had their fun with the bodies would have to be disposed of. And this is a quote from Professor Bernard Knight, who wrote a book about Fred and Mary West, or Fred and Rose West. He said the bodies
had been dismembered. All the heads had been taken off, and there were small cuts on the vertebrae, usually in the same place on the necks. All the legs had been taken off at the hip. There were very little cut marks around the head of the thigh bones. They're pretty well done, I think.
Pretty well done.
Yep, that is a direct quote. He said, they were pretty well done, I think.
Well, I think you're right.
So when the cellar filled up with bodies, and then, God, this is so disturbing. When the cellar filled up with bodies, Fred poured concrete over the floor and converted the room into a bedroom for his kids.
Well,
that's fine, because kids love to play with ghosts. If we've learned anything from movies.
So let's go through the victims here, at least the known victims. Caroline Cooper, she was killed in 1973. She was strangled and dismembered, tortured for days. Lucy Partington, she was kidnapped on her way to visit a disabled friend and was tortured for a week before she was finally killed. In 1974, Therese Seigenthaler, she was kidnapped while hitchhiking to Ireland and she was killed. Shirley Hubbard was also killed in 1974. She was the one when they recovered her head. The head was completely covered in tape with only a straw poking out for her to breathe through. The murders also included lodgers that stayed at the house, such as Juanita Marion Mott, who was killed in 1975, and Shirley Ann Robinson, who was actually a prostitute for the West until she became pregnant with Fred's child, tried to replace Rose in the power relationship, and Rose, of course, having none of that, brutally murdered her. Of course, the basement was full.
So at some point, it just became a really, really bad Airbnb.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the basement was full, so Fred buried her in the rear garden after dismembering both her and her unborn child, his own flesh and blood. He had done this twice now, where he had gotten a woman pregnant. He killed her, cut the stomach open, and dismembered the baby as well.
And there should be some sort of movie about Rose West versus Shirley Ann Robinson in that house, where it's like, because she saw herself, she was like, I could be the kingpin of this family. And so it's like Shirley Ann Robinson was like, I get to be in charge of this murder family. And then Rose West is like, you have to beat me in order to be in charge.
Right.
Well, you know, John Candy would have been great in the role as Fred West in that.
Leave John Candy out of it. Rest in peace. What are you doing? Good God, he's too innocent for such a perverted...
Doesn't seem like a John Candy movie.
Fred West was like 5'8" or something. I think
Loosely
Paul
based.
Giamatti.
Loosely based on it.
Yeah, maybe. If you really want to make it lighthearted and funny with a good message at the end, maybe John Candy. What are you bringing Candy up for? Good
You
Lord.
know what? Maybe I shouldn't rape him.
Oh.
Last sentence of the movie.
Oh, Uncle West.
So Fred Rose's last confirmed sexually motivated murder would be Allison Chambers in 1975. That's the last one that we know of in the house itself, because the cellar was full, the garden was full, there was no more room to put bodies anywhere. So it's probable that the West continued on their murder spree for the next 19 years.
Jesus Christ.
Allison Chambers was the last one found in 1975. They were caught in 1992.
Oh my, yeah, they were definitely killing. They wouldn't have stopped.
Yeah.
That's what they said when they found him too, and they were going through, like, basically, they'll allude. We'll talk about it later on, but they alluded to, like, not only were there bodies at the house, and there were bodies out by this lake. There was a farm plot that he may have bought that could possibly have dozens of bodies.
Right. Yeah. He told his son that there were 20 or more women buried there. But it's also likely that Fred committed a bunch of murders in the early 60s. He'd live in Glasgow, where we'll be playing at the Glasgow Comedy Festival on April 25th, I believe. You can get your tickets at gigsandtours.com.
I hope we find some bones.
I think we will if we go looking.
But during his time there, 4 young girls who matched Fred West's criteria all disappeared. And he had rented a garden plot while living in Glasgow, but by the time the crimes came to light, the plot had been buried under Junction 22 of the M8 highway. And of course, they can't shut down the M8 to go looking for some girls.
Nope.
So they will forever be under M8.
Well, what a fun way to be, I guess. Kind of got cars driving all over you, and you're dead.
Part of the hubbub of everyday life in Scotland.
Yeah. All right.
So in 1986, Fred and Rose's daughter, Heather, told a friend about the abuse that both she and her sister, Amory, had endured over a decade or longer. And it was some of the most... in the abuse that they visited upon their daughters was fucking horrific.
He viewed them as, basically, he was trying to raise prostitutes for their prostitute ring.
Yeah.
And he viewed them as sexual toys to be developed.
And he would bring them in during the torture sessions of the girls that they killed.
Sure.
Yeah, it's bad.
Well, it's the same thing
bad.
his parents did with him to some degree. It's the family business, it seems like.
Yeah. So the friend that Heather had confided in, she told her parents, who were friends of the West. And of course, at this time, the walls started to close in around Fred and Rose. They started to see their perfect fucking murder sex utopia coming to an end. But it was most likely Rose who murdered her daughter, who was, as I said earlier, probably the product of Rose's incestuous relationship with the father. And Fred, looking to fit one more body into the family plot, enlisted his son Stephen to help him dig the hole under the guise of building a new patio where he buried his daughter's dismembered corpse. His
Marcus,
first...
As a child, you like to dig holes.
It was my favorite.
Isn't that interesting? Moving on.
It is weird.
Red flag, another Marcus Parks. Red flag.
I gotta find a sound effect for that.
Also, and so that's what I do then throughout their childhood. There was, I guess, a quote unquote family joke where every single time they would do something wrong, Fred would threaten, you better stop doing that or you're going to end up under the patio like your sister Heather.
Yeah. Although he had initially told him, oh, no, she's gone to work in Devon. You'll never see her again.
Tough job, yeah.
Yeah, real tough job.
Well,
You'll never see it
24/7,
again.
7 days a week job.
Yeah, exactly.
24 hours, 7 days a week.
So finally, in fucking May of 1992, after decades of operating, West, he raped a friend of his daughter's, and when the girl told a friend at the school, police finally came to investigate 25 Cromwell Street. And the friends, they went to the police, and the case was assigned to Detective Constable Hazel Savage, who you will remember from Rena making the complaint that Fred was a sexual deviant 20 years before.
Yeah.
And she remembered all the stories that Rena had told her about.
Also,
Fred's sexual
another
perversions.
build-up too was that social services started trying to figure out where Heather was.
Yeah.
Heather was looking. Basically, Heather had been missing for school for 7 years, and finally
For 7 years?
Yeah, 7
Yeah.
years, yeah.
and they started like legitimately were like, "Hey, where's Heather?"
Her
And they
desk is
started
there.
looking into it.
Yeah.
Yep. So on August 6, 1992, police arrived at 25 Cromwell Street with a search warrant to look for pornography and evidence of child abuse. They found bondage masks and suits, a large assortment of dildos and vibrators, and of course, an embarrassing amount of pornography.
Oh God!
He was
Don't
just
even look at my search history.
Just
Oh.
red in the face, wasn't he?
I mean, it was piles and piles of magazines, and they were also really into taking pictures of Rose and sending them into swingers magazines
Right.
to get people to comment on the photos.
Which means people jacked off to Rose West while she was murdering and raping a bunch of kids in her house.
That is absolutely true. So they arrested Rose for assisting in the rape of a minor, and Fred was arrested for rape and sodomy of a minor. But the case collapsed again when two witnesses refused to testify. But Detective Constable Hazel Savage had caught wind of the strange disappearance of Heather West because not only was she gone for 7 years, but rumors were going around town that Fred was always making this joke. It was like, oh,
Right.
if you fuck up, you're going to end up under the patio like Heather. Like that. So Detective Hazel Savage pursued the case for another 2 years before she
Jesus.
finally got enough evidence to produce a search warrant for 25 Cromwell Street, and Heather's remains were found right in the hole that
The
West
evidence should
and
have
his son
began-
had dug 7 years earlier.
The evidence should have began and ended with, does he walk with a limp? Oh, he does? Okay, let's charge him.
Well, so, and basically, as soon as they found these bodies, Fred West confessed to everything. He tried to keep his wife out of it because he didn't want her to get arrested.
Yeah.
And so he confessed to everything. He said he did it. He did three. He said, I killed 3 people. They're all under the patio. But then he began this thing where he would tell them that ghosts would talk to him. And so he created this whole fantasy about, like, first he was like, I killed her because she, like, I accidentally killed her. He's like, my hands are so strong. He's like, I could pull, I don't know what a spanner is. He's like, I could pull off 3 lug nuts without a spanner with my own hands.
Thank
Yeah.
God.
So it's like, I grabbed her and I accidentally snapped her neck. And then he started saying, oh, no, she's working for a drug dealer in Devon, right? And then he started saying, no, I talked to ghosts.
So the ghosts are his last resort. Yeah.
This was last, cause he says, I talked to ghosts. And so he said that the three people haunted him. And so he wanted to get off his chest. And then when they were looking for more bodies, when they realized like there's nothing, they were starting to find bits of bone underneath the patio. They're like, they start looking for more bodies. We're going to start shifting down to the basement. What they would do to have him, he would do this ruse. They were like, okay, we'll believe you talk to ghosts. So they would bring him down in the basement with a medium. And he would walk the basement with his hands out and being like, it's like, tell us where the ghosts are talking to you, where the bodies are. And he would be like, I see one here. They're spinning round me. They're spinning round. It's so dumb. So weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very strange. But Fred, he would eventually confess to 9 other murders after the bodies were found. He never confessed officially to any other murders out of this. And strangely enough, he always denied, the one murder that he denied was Annie McFall. His very first murder, the pregnant woman, the woman that he got pregnant.
Sure.
That was the only one that he maintained. He's like, nope, didn't kill her. I killed everybody else. I killed Rena. I killed Charmaine. I killed all of the girls, but I didn't kill McFall.
All right.
But you see this, I mean, you always see this in the serial killer cases where people that are charged, except for, people like Dahmer, but they've been charged with multiple crimes. And even though it is very obvious that all of the murders are directly linked to them, like Chikatilo.
One of them, it's always like one of them
like
is
one
one
or
that they
two.
feel extremely guilty
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. It's the
You
one.
think
It's the
that's
only
it?
one that matters. Yeah. Because he has to deny it to himself. Because he's still a superhero in his own mind.
Yeah. So Fred, now that he knew his life would be over, he knew that there was no more sex, there was no more perversion, there was no more torture, hung himself in his cell while awaiting trial on New Year's Day, 1995, while with a knotted bedsheet while awaiting trial in Birmingham, which we will be appearing at in our last podcast on the left live tour.
Ooh, exciting.
In March. Tickets go on sale on Friday,
All right.
gigsandtours.com. And Fred had only four mourners, or actually I wouldn't say only, he had 4 people
Yeah,
come.
I was going to say only 4. I can't believe.
Yeah, 4 people came to his service, and the service lasted less than 5 minutes. They cremated him and then scattered his ashes in the countryside of Gloucester.
All right.
And Rose West, still alive to this day.
She's still alive. And have you heard about this thing, how she's grown out her mustache?
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
She shaved her head. This is not a joke. She shaved her head and grown out her mustache, and then she sits alone all day. And if anybody tries to talk to her, she goes, ah!
That's about right.
Yep, she was eventually charged with the 10 murders, but only after Fred had died. If Fred had gone to trial, I don't know if Rose West would have ever been charged with any of the murders.
crazy.
But they needed somebody. They needed somebody to hang for this.
All the confessions, he only blamed himself. He said that she had nothing to do with it.
Right.
Yeah, he did. But yeah, she eventually took all the blame for it. She lives at top security Low Newton Jail in Durham, and she enjoys playing Monopoly, embroidery, cooking, and shopping from catalogs.
I want Park Place because it's got a big basement.
Oh.
Weird. All right, everyone. Well, that's Fred and Rose West. Jesus, what a demented couple. But again, a spiritual connection, no doubt they had.
Truly in love.
Truly in love.
That's how you know if somebody loves you. If they're willing to cop to 12 murders.
Turn them in.
Innocent.
If you're with the guy and he's like, let's go kill that woman and let's rape her and kill her in the basement, just turn him right in.
Yeah.
Just don't even bother playing with it. He'll just do that to you, too.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Let's do a Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. And Heil Geen.
I'll give a Magustalations out there. I'm going to say a hail yourselves, and I mean that
If
from
you
the
don't
bottom of my
hail
heart.
me, you owe me $1.
Well, you're about to get $10,000.
And if you got 25 extra dollars, go and get your Last Podcast on the Left t-shirt. Just go to cavecomedyradio.com/Last Podcast on the Left, and you can get your very own awesome Last Podcast on the Left t-shirt. Don't forget to go to iTunes and rate and review the podcast. Helps us keep up there and, the top 50, top 100. Let's try to get to the top 20.
That would
And
be
after we get
amazing.
to the top
And, you know,
20, let's try to get to the fucking top 10. Why not?
You guys are really the best fans on earth.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you so much. The Facebook page are great for all the shows, Top Hat and Roundtable and everything that Marcus does, Sex and Other Human Activities, with Jackie Zabrowski, Page 7. all that
Page
stuff.
7 is awesome.
You
Page
guys
7 is
are,
wonderful. Get in the Ring. What a great podcast.
That's
Yes,
another fun
go
one.
listen to Get in the Ring. That's done by Tim Warner and James Maddern. It's a Guns N' Roses themed podcast.
Can't
And it's,
go wrong
it's
with that.
fucking great.
I don't
That's
know
awesome.
shit all about Guns N' Roses, and I like the podcast a lot.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for supporting the community and supporting us. And we can't wait to see you if you're out in the UK March 23rd through the 27th.
Yep, that's right.
All right, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.